Hello and welcome to our webinar. We are Truth in Accounting, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization whose mission is to educate and empower citizens with understandable, reliable, and transparent government financial information. Today, we are discussing state and local governments' financial reports. While most people focus on a government's budget, a government's financial report is an even more important document. We will discuss why that is so and what you can learn from the financial reports throughout this webinar. A government's financial report is called a CAFR, short for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. It reports the results of the budget and other financial decisions. So why is a CAFR important? A CAFR provides taxpayers and other users with the government's current financial position and the revenue and expenses the government earned and incurred over a period of time. That period of time is referred to as a fiscal year. For most city governments, a fiscal year is a calendar year from January 1st to December 31st. Most states' fiscal years are from July 1st to June 30th. A CAFR tends to be a better measure of the government's finances than the budget because it is prepared using a set of accounting standards and it's audited. Budgets, on the other hand, are prepared using rules determined by elected officials, who tend to overstate revenue estimates and understate how much they are going to spend. What can you learn from a CAFR? A CAFR reports what the government owns, or its assets. It includes the assets the government has, like cash, investments, and capital assets, such as land, building, and other infrastructure. It also includes what the government owes, or its liabilities. These liabilities reported include the government's bills, bonded debt, and unfunded pension benefits. A CAFR also indicates if your government made or lost money during the fiscal year, and if the government has pushed current costs onto future taxpayers. You can also find detailed information about how the government invests, its infrastructure, government debt, including bonds, and unfunded pension liabilities. You'll also find a magic number, which is the unrestricted net position. We'll get to why this number is magic a little later on. Today we are going to look at the CAFR for the City of Los Angeles for fiscal year which ended June 30th, 2017. Fortunately, all CAFRs use the same format, so feel free to follow along with your government's CAFR. The parts of the CAFR include a table of contents, an introductory section, a financial section, required supplementary information, combining financial statements and schedules, and a statistical section. Let's look at each section more closely. The first section of the CAFR is an introductory section, which includes a letter of transmittal. In the hard copy version of Los Angeles CAFR, this letter can be found on page L1. In this presentation, we will assume that you're looking at the CAFR in a PDF format. In that case, the transmittal letter is on PDF page 9. The date of the letter is theoretically the date the CAFR was issued, but in some cases, governments backdate the letter of transmittal. The letter should be addressed to elected officials, and more importantly, to the citizens. The letter is signed by the government official who compiles and publishes the CAFR. In Los Angeles' case, that is the city controller. The next section of the CAFR is the financial section, and it includes the independent auditor's report. In the Los Angeles CAFR, this can be found on PDF page 26. You'll want to look to see if the statements were audited by a government official, like a government auditor, or an outside accounting firm. Los Angeles' CAFR was audited by an outside accounting firm, MGO. Unfortunately, some governments do not use outside firms. Having a government official audit the CAFR is like having a fox watch the henhouse. Truth in Accounting's Financial Transparency Score report found that for fiscal year 2017, only 15 state governments used an outside auditor. The auditor's opinion can be found toward the bottom of the auditor's report. It tells you whether the CAFR received a clean opinion, meaning it passed. In Los Angeles CAFR, this opinion can be found on PDF page 27. To determine if the financial statements received a clean opinion, look for the words present fairly and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Keep in mind that these are not the same rules corporations use to prepare their financial reports. In rare instances, the auditor might give a qualified or disclaimer opinion, which essentially means the government flunked its audit. The next part of the financial section is the MD&A, the Management's Discussion and Analysis, in which the CAFR preparer introduces the financial statements and provides an analytical overview of the government's financial activities. In the Los Angeles CAFR, this can be found on PDF page 31. Please note that the management discussion and analysis is unaudited, and it's written by government officials, so what is included and stated may be more political than factual, and it usually puts the government in the best light. The next part of the CAFR's financial section are the basic financial statements. The first statements are government-wide financial statements, which include the statement of net position and the statement of activities. These statements are prepared using full accrual accounting, similar to the way corporations do their financial reporting. Each financial statement has columns for government and business type activities of the primary government, and a column for the total of the primary government, which is a sum of the first two columns. Unlike Los Angeles, most governments also have a column for discretely presented component units. These are entities that are legally separate from the government, but are so financially intertwined with the government that excluding them would be misleading or incomplete. Examples are housing authorities, tollways, and state-run university and colleges. When Truth in Accounting does its analysis, we include the amounts of the primary government and discretely presented component units. The first government-wide statement is the statement of net position. In Los Angeles CAFR, this can be found on PDF page 62. The first section of the statement of net position is the assets. This is what the government owns. Included are cash, investments, and capital assets, which means building, land, and other infrastructure. Keep in mind that Los Angeles, like most states and cities, report the amount of their CAFRs in thousands. So Los Angeles's total assets are almost $63 billion. The next section of the statement of net position is deferred outflows. These are totally confusing and misleading and are not very helpful. You only need to understand that they inflate the government's net position and understate expenses. The next section of the statement of net position is liabilities. These are what the government owes, including accounts payable, bonds, and other long-term liabilities. Some governments, like Los Angeles, list their net pension liability here. In Los Angeles' case, the amount is $10.3 billion. Unfortunately for Los Angeles and most governments, this amount is usually a year old. When Truth in Accounting does its analysis, we review the pension plan's latest CAFRs or actuarial reports to find the current year's amount. For many governments, the net pension liability amount is included in a separate section with the long-term liabilities. So to find the net pension liability, you have to first find the schedule of change in long-term liabilities. In Los Angeles' case, this schedule can be found on PDF page 160. Also included on the schedule is the net OPEB obligation. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. Most of these benefits are for retirees' health care. Unfortunately, the obligation reported does not represent the full amount of the government's unfunded OPEB liability. As we will discuss later, the full unfunded OPEB liability can be found in the required supplemental information. After fiscal year 2018, the governments will report a full liability as a net OPEB liability in the government's long-term liabilities. Then we are back to the confusing deferrals. In this case, it's deferred inflows. Deferred inflows represent revenues and income whose recognition is deferred or put off until future years. While some of the deferred inflows are valid, such as when a local government reports property taxes levied a year in advance, Truth in Accounting believes most deferred inflows, especially those related to pensions, are invalid and cause the government's net possession and revenues to be understated. The government's net position is determined by adding the assets in deferred outflows and subtracting the liabilities in deferred inflows. Los Angeles' total assets of almost $63 billion are added to the deferred outflows of $4.5 billion. Then the total liabilities of $44.7 billion and the deferred inflows of approximately $1.8 billion are subtracted, for a net position of almost $21 billion. So this means the city owns more than it owes. But you must keep in mind that all of the assets are not available to spend. Just as you shouldn't sell your house to buy groceries, government's capital assets should not be sold to pay for current services and benefits, and the use of some assets is restricted by law or contract. Only what the government calls the unrestricted portion of the net position is available to spend. And this is what we like to call our magic number. The unrestricted net position is the most important number in the CAFR because it can tell you if the government has pushed current costs onto future taxpayers. If a government's unrestricted amount is positive, then the government has assets available to pay future bills. If the unrestricted amount is negative, then the government needs money to pay bills it has accumulated to date. In Los Angeles' case, the amount is negative, which is indicated here by the parentheses. This means that expenses like pension costs have been incurred in the past, but the burden of paying for these will fall onto future taxpayers. This means that the city is not living up to the intent of its balanced budget requirement. Because of weak accounting standards, the unrestricted amount is not completely accurate, but it is the best number available. When Truth in Accounting does its analysis of a government, we calculate a more precise number and call it money needed to pay bills. You can find our analyses for states and most populous cities on statedatalab.org. The second basic financial statement is the statement of activities, which includes the government's revenue and expenses for the year. This statement is similar to a corporate income statement. The top part of this statement includes expenses and revenues associated with government and business activities. The first column of this statement lists the expenses by activities. The next three columns include the types of revenue generated by those activities. The last three columns is the difference between the revenues and expenses. In Los Angeles' case, the expenses incurred to perform the activities exceeded the revenue generated by those activities by $3.5 billion. The bottom section of the statement includes the government's general revenues, such as taxes levied, fees, and federal grants. For Los Angeles, the net expenses from activities of $3.5 billion is subtracted from the general revenues of $4.6 billion, resulting in a change of net position of $1.1 billion. This means that the city reported that it had a net income of more than $1 billion in 2017. If a government's change in net position amount is negative, then the government lost money and they did not balance their budget that year. Following the government-wide financial statements are the various fund statements. The fact that these statements are prepared using what is called a modified accrual basis of accounting, similar to a cash basis, makes these statements misleading. We usually ignore these statements. Following the voluminous fund statements are the notes to the financial statements. Los Angeles CAFR includes an index of notes on PDF page 83. The important notes are the ones related to investments, capital assets, and long-term liabilities. The most important notes are the ones related to the government's pension systems or plans and other post-employment benefits. In Los Angeles CAFR, the pension notes start on PDF page 202. Here you will find various plans the government is involved in, the benefits provided, the contributions made, and the actuarial assumptions. Very important information about a government's pension and retiree health care plans is buried deep within the CAFR, under a section called Required Supplemental Information. In the case of Los Angeles, this section starts on PDF page 258. For many governments, the RSI will include a schedule of change in net pension liability and related ratios for each of its pension plans. For Los Angeles City's Employees Retirement System, the schedule can be found on PDF page 261. The total pension liability included represents the amount of benefits promised. On this schedule, the plan assets are called the fiduciary net position. The amount the employer or the government contributed is listed, as well as what the members or employees contributed. In Los Angeles' case, you can see the employer contributions are increasing and are more than double what the employees are contributing. How much the plan earned each year is included in a line titled Net Investment Income. The net pension liability listed here of $5.6 billion is the portion of benefits promised that are unfunded. The fiduciary net position as a percentage of the total pension liability is the funded ratio. Another way to think of this is that the 67.77% indicates that the city has set aside less than 68 cents for each dollar of promised benefits. Also found in the RSI is the other post-employment benefits schedule of funding progress, which includes the unfunded actuarial accrued liability, listed as the unfunded AAL in Los Angeles' CAFR. This is the amount the actuaries have calculated based on the beneficiary's age and retirement status that the government has not funded. Unlike the net OPEB obligation report on the statement of net position, this is the government's total net OPEB liability. After fiscal year 2017, this schedule will be replaced with a schedule of net OPEB liability. And finally, we have the statistical section. In Los Angeles' case, this starts on PDF page 383. It includes the financial trends, revenue capacity, debt capacity, and other demographic and economic information. So to recap what you can learn from a CAFR, we went over the government's net position, which is the assets and deferred outflows minus the liabilities and deferred inflows. The unrestricted net position, which is our magic number, and if negative, indicates if bills are being pushed onto future taxpayers. The change in net position, which indicates whether the budget is balanced. And data about your government's unfunded pension and OPEB systems or plans. But if you don't want to go through all of this trouble, and because CAFRs tend to be long and complex documents, and because of weak accounting standards, Truth in Accounting recasts government numbers into easy to understand 2-page documents. You can find our analysis of each state and the 75 largest cities on statedatalab.org. Once there, click on State or City Data at the top and choose your state or city. Scroll down and you will find our easy to understand 2-page report, which includes things like a financial grade, money needed to pay bills, and each taxpayer's share of this debt, which we like to call a taxpayer burden. Scroll down further to find prior year's data on the taxpayer burden. You'll also find a link to the government's CAFR. State Data Lab also allows you to create charts comparing states and cities on more than 450 data series, including our proprietary Truth in Accounting data, as well as more economic and demographic data. For more information, you can subscribe to our Morning Call, which is our free daily newsletter that brings you the top stories on government finance, accounting, and transparency straight to your inbox. For more information, please visit either of our websites. Please do not hesitate to contact us if you need any assistance with reviewing your government's CAFR. We would be happy to discuss doing a financial state of your local government or school district. Thank you for your time and interest in government finances.